Okay.
Welcome. Sunday morning.
So,
Got
we
a
had
fun story to tell.
Yep. So, Sam is the production engineer in this little fancy project that we do here down in Sam's basement, and basically, we had a little bit of a mess up. Basically, I think I've said basically at least 4 basic times, but I didn't record the audio. I didn't have the audio input correctly aligned with the segment channel of the. It's basically all Techo speak, but I messed up. So we're gonna record a quick little 15-minute episode of Matthew 24:14 and No Nut November. Enjoy.
Okay, so yeah, so we had a really good warm-up conversation, and now we get to bring it on home. So step 1.
Make sure that the audio input is in the correct segment aligner. I'm talking like in
the flux capacitor 909.
Yeah. So
well, this is all symbolic of how in life you make mistakes, but you can come back from those mistakes. That's not the end. So let's jump into Matthew 24.
Okay, so 24, you can read it, 24:14, you can read it yourself. We read it in the last one, but we don't have time for this one, so I will give my outline on it. It's basically, I will give my Sam version of it.
The synopsis of, which the parable of the talents, right?
Yes.
Which I think a lot of people are familiar with, and those who are not, the Cliff Notes version via the Sam Notes version will suffice. So.
Okay, so basically there's this master, and he has all these servants, and we don't know how many servants. He could have 10,000, whatever. But then this parable here, he's got these 3 servants that he leaves these talents to, and a talent is equivalent to a lot of money. Like a lot of money, like
years
15
worth
years
of
wages.
Yeah,
it doesn't specify whether it's silver or whether it's gold. A silver talent is worth about 15 years in wages. Okay, a gold one, more.
Probably more, I'm guessing.
Okay, so he leaves 5 to this one dude. He leaves 2 to this other dude, and then he leaves 1 to this other dude. Now, what needs to be clear here is that in verse 15, he says, to one talent, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Mm-hmm. So each according to his ability. So clearly the guy who got 5 had more abilities. Okay, we got that.
Yeah.
To the one who had 1, he probably had 1 ability. Okay, so then the dude with 5, the master leaves, and then the dude with 5 talents immediately goes out and hustles and gets 5 more talents. Woo!
Yes. Which
is unbelievable to do that, right? And then another dude who has 2 talents goes out and gets 2 more talents. Woo! Mm-hmm. And then the guy who has the 1 talent takes that talent, digs a hole, puts that talent in there, and then it just festers while his master is gone. The master comes back and then is like, yo, you got 5 more talents. And he says specifically here, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, and I will set you over much, which I think means
give you some of my estate or maybe some more talents. I don't know, but
and then
I'm going to give you more responsibility.
And then the guy with 2 talents came back, and he had 2 more talents. Incredible, right?
Great guy.
So then,
good servant.
Again, he says, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. And the guy with the 1 talent, oh, poor little man. He ended up just digging that hole.
Yeah.
And the
master's like,
the master says, you wicked and slothful servant.
Ouch.
You knew that I reap where I have not sowed and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers.
That's right. So what do we get out of that parable? What is your take on that?
Mine, and I will jump to exactly what I think was the most strongest point, was my personal story, in that I was living in a small town, and I thought I didn't have Wi-Fi, I didn't have cable, I didn't communicate with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I kind of cut myself off of the world and started reading the New Testament, like everybody should do. At some point.
Plug for the New Testament.
Yeah, it was like a retreat, less of a, though I got to work with my grandfather and see and experience a lot of really good memories with him.
But it was tough because you were out there pretty much on your own, isolated.
By myself. The most attractive girl in that town was my cousin.
That sounds like a classic Southern Missouri story right there.
So, I was in a pretty dark spot where I said to myself that it had better be that I stay out here and labor the rest of my life, not find a wife, not pursue anything meaningful with the gifts that God has granted me personally, and stay there rather than come back to Kansas City and do something like a podcast, live streaming here with Isaac. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of worked the past and current into the picture of that, but I had that thought, and it was very dark, and I got depressed, and it was bad. I dug a hole and stuck. I thought that might have been a good idea. So I know what the dude with the one talent who thought of just burying that talent was going through.
And the other thing we talked about is how the talents can be, compared to gifts, opportunities, literal talents also that God gives us in our lives, right? The master is God. He gives these people these things, right? And he doesn't tell them what to do with it. He just gives it to them, right? At least in this
context.
And people choose what to do with it. And those who choose to use their talents and gifts to go out there and give something back to the world and to do something good and to really serve God in the sense that you are using the gifts he's given you to help other people, right? And to multiply and replicate it. That's really because all our gifts we get aren't ours. They're from him, right?
Yeah.
And there are those who are nervous and are scared to kind of branch out and use those things and they just sit and do nothing, right? Like you were feeling like maybe doing out there and wherever you were at in Missouri, right?
Yeah.
And in the end, what happens is there's this expectation that we are supposed to do active, like we're proactive in the way that we use the gifts, talents, and opportunities that God gives us because they're really not ours, right? They're his. And they're his because he's the only reason we're living in the first place, right? And the promise here is if we do that, then, our lives will be better.
Yeah.
And if we don't get punished, right? He didn't throw him in prison and kill him.
He cast him, the worthless servant, into the outer darkness.
I guess in that sense, he's punished, like outer darkness, right? But in the context of the parable, it's like the real punishment is just that, the Lord, he takes it away from you because he gives us these things to see what we'll do with it. And
just prior to that, he even it says here that so take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. That's another. We can go into that all day long. But to everyone who has, to everyone who has will more be given,
right?
And he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away.
Yeah. And
basically, that's what it's saying. Is that for to everyone who has gifts, will more be given.
And so that we can kind of take as a segue into the next segment, which is people can look at the scripture and be like, "Oh, God's telling me what to do with my stuff. He's giving me these rules of how I'm supposed to live my life. What's up with that?" Segue into
No Nut November. If you haven't heard of something like this before, it is the newest trend online. It is basically where these youngsters are saying that they're going to put off pornography, they're going to put off masturbation, and they're going to live for God. Just kidding. They're not going. They didn't say that the part that.
Right. But that's the point, right?
But yeah. But anyway, so they are going to put all of that off for the month of November. They're essentially making a sacrifice for the month of November to abstain, be abstinent, to be. Okay.
Yeah,
that was almost as good as the first one.
That's pretty good. I liked it. Yeah, that was good.
So there's a trend that's going online, and people are saying that they're giving up masturbation and pornography, which is a taboo at this point.
Right, because that's what we talked about was how the norm is, okay, that's what, when you're a teenager, that's what you do, right? Pornography and masturbation and things like that. That's what you do when you're
bored.
and you're like a teen or a young man or whatever, right? And some people think that's normal to do, like in marriage, like that's the norm, right?
Yeah.
Pornography is like, that's the thing. Keeps you sexually healthy, and it's good for you, right?
It stimulates your mind.
Sure, whatever. And so,
which is absolute bull, because it affects the same parts of your brain as drugs do.
yeah, right. And so
Look me up on that. That's true.
Yeah, site. No. So we were talking about how this idea that, you know, on the one hand we were like, okay, good for these guys, right? They're not doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
vow.
right? But on the other hand, it's like, well, they're not actually doing it. They're not trying to do it because they think it's wrong. They just want to see how long they go without doing it, right? And the idea is, you know, that if you choose to make these decisions to abstain from certain things to change your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a Christian perspective, you do that because God has asked you to, and there's the expectation if you do that with like the motivation behind making those changes in your life and abstaining from things you think are wrong and actively doing things you think are right, that you're doing, that's going to help you. It's going to help your life. It's going to bless your life and the people around you, and it's going to be the best way to demonstrate that you actually love God, right? And so,
but in reality, they're just like, we're not doing it because we want to challenge ourselves. We want to see if we can get a trophy at the end of the month and be able to, for the rest of our life, be able to say, yeah, November, totally went all November. And then also in sober October, I was sober all throughout October. And you know what? When it comes time for my New Year's resolution, I am going to go to church every Sunday.
Or you compared it to, it's just like, you know, whether if you think that, if you're actually abstaining from that because you think it's wrong, it's the same thing as saying like, oh, talk to your girlfriend, I'm not going to cheat on you for the month of November, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, just for November, you know?
Well, it's a lie to yourself, really, is what it is that like, you know, I'm not going to do this for this month. It's worse than a lie. It's deceiving yourself. Mm-hmm. Is that it's saying to yourself like, yeah, I'm not gonna do this for this month. Like, why are you not doing it for that month to begin with?
Yeah.
If it's just for the challenge, then like, what the hell? Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're in the category of like, it's bad for me, mm-hmm. then like, why would you continue to do that?
Right. Yeah.
To yourself. So then come 1st of December is that if you choose to continue not doing that, then
right. And then we talked about how
and it can get to that, but it can get to that point. I think that if it starts, I think that you can start out with bad intentions and that comes good intentions. Mm-hmm. But that's not always the case.
Right.
So I'm not dogging on anyone who's just doing it because of it's a challenge.
Sure. Right. I mean, that's the way we do it fine. Right. And I think the reason why this is something we want to talk about is because, you know,
the road is narrow.
Yeah.
and there could be a sign right there that says, "No Fap November leads to Christ," and you might take that route.
Sure.
Okay.
But like the bottom line, like the whole principle of it is like, you know, you had mentioned that Paul talks about how, you know, immorality and breaking those types
sexual
of
immorality is a sin not only against the spirit, but it's also a sin against the flesh.
Right. And then that reminded me of how you talked about how like you look at pornography and things like that, like it makes this implant in your brain. It really affects you and changes you. And I believe that's absolutely true. We both talked about how we both in our past.
Well, when you're viewing pornography, you're a cuck.
Sure. Yeah.
You're a cuck. I mean, you're sitting there and you're acting out what this guy is doing, and so like you're living vicariously through another man, and so that is going to be implanted in your mind,
right?
As like you're somebody else.
Yeah. And bottom line, and I could talk about, you know, the damaging effects of pornography all day, but
sure.
The bottom line is that Paul talks about how it's damaging to the body and spirit. There are things you do that are damaging to your spirit, like treating other people poorly, right? You know, lying and coveting, whatever you want to say. But they're also like our bodies, and this is consistent with a lot of Christian belief, including the Church Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, is your body is a gift from God, and because of that, He sets the rules for how you're supposed to use it. He tells you how you get to use it, and if you
you will get syphilis.
That could be a consequence, yeah. And if you go outside those boundaries, yeah, there are consequences. There are physical consequences like your STDs. There are damages in marriages, right? There are things like that, but there are also spiritual side effects for your life. It's
habitual,
just worse.
addictive.
Yeah, but the life is just worse. And so that all culminates to one thing, which is these rules that people call them, air quote rules. They're these commandments that God gives us to follow. They are not meant to restrict us and to make us feel like control our lives, but they're ways to protect us. And the way thing my dad says, like phrase he coins, is if you look at them as God's secrets to happiness, then living them is a little easier to do. Because the idea is if we do that, we live within those bounds, it's liberating because we're free from all the negative effects of making those decisions. Our lives are actually better. And I think so, and that comes full circle to talents and how God gives us these gifts, these opportunities, and we do it kind of consecrated and dedicated to him and live within those bounds, then all around our lives are better because we do have that freedom that comes from, just from living a life that is, it's just better. And
there we go.
And that's episode 2. Recap of the original episode 2.
We won't let it happen again, folks. We're trying. We're working
We're
real
working
hard
on
on this
it.
production side of things, and we just hope that you have yourself a good November.
Yep.
We'll see you December 1st.
December 1st. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you on the next one.